Hi, so it's me again. And for those who have just joined us, because I just saw some audience joining in, my name is Winston Thomas, and I am the editor-in-chief for CDOTrends, as well as a few other publications. Now, we are switching over to a different topic. First, we talk about data 360, but now we're talking about another topic which is also hot in the market as we write articles, and that's end-to-end automation of analytics. The premise is simple. Data science teams and data teams are asked to generate insights faster and build data pipelines more rapidly, but they are all under stress. So clearly the only way forward is automation and data democratization. The first allows data engineers to build data pipelines, prepare the data, while the second allows data science teams to focus on the harder problems, while other data users or citizen data analysts can focus on other issues. So we know there are an array of tools and solutions in the market, but how can companies best use them to their benefit, and what are the steps forward? For this to ponder, we have three panelists, which we will be talking with in the next 55 minutes. First, we have Suganthi Shivkumar, Vice President for Asia Alteryx. Next, we have Sarkin, Head of Data Analytics for Life and Health, Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa at Munich Re. That's a lot of regions, Lee. And we have ThengHui Chong, CTO for Hyattly. Before we begin, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of things. This session is about engagement and sharing. So please feel free to use the Q&A button to join the discussion, not the chat, but the Q&A button. And so we can get your questions answered. We also have a couple of vouchers for this session as well. So the first three questions will get you caffeinated with probably Starbucks. And lastly, the three panelists are joining us as thought leaders, so please view their points discussed today as based on their personal experience and insights and not necessarily representative of their companies. So let's dive in. Maybe I can start with Lee. We have been talking about democratization of analytics, and for that to happen, you need the right data and the right people. Let's talk about the data. How do you ensure we have the right data? And how do you alleviate the pressure on a lot of data ops teams, which are actually quite small?
Thanks, Winston, and good morning to everyone attending and my fellow panelists. Yes, I think this is an introductory comment, I think, on the topic end-to-end automation. I think really we do have to embrace at the same time modern ML ops technology, which is bringing automation across the end-to-end ML ops lifecycle from development to production of AI solutions. At the same time, we need to have a healthy dose of skepticism around exactly what can be automated. So just on the data front, I can comment from a financial service insurance perspective. As you would expect, many companies are still dealing with a lot of legacy system issues. So I think it's important to understand, firstly, the source of data, the different systems. But even before you do that, really, I think the place to start is the business problem. Because if you don't have a clear understanding of the business problem, there's little point talking about the data that you need, right? Source systems, linkages of different data sets. So one of the challenges we face in insurance is automation solutions already in place, which are rule engines, and they're often automating risk assessment when people apply for insurance. And then you have data from back office systems. And really for AI solution development, for solving valuable problems, you have to link the two sources. So when we talk about data, you have to understand we've got data coming from very different sources in the business. And each requires very different domain knowledge to understand properly, deal with its limitations, link the data properly. So there's a lot of legacy issues around those workflows that are coming, which pose automation challenges. So, the industry is obviously trying to modernize this all towards standard data models, but certainly in Asia, there aren't standard data models that all insurers are using. So there is a lot of customized bespoke work around data extraction from source systems and the applications, the pre-processing. So I think there is still quite a long way to go in automation. Having said that, I guess once you have developed solutions, you can realize automation, how you recycle things like your data pre-processing and preparation pipelines into production. And of course, ML ops is a big topic, I think, for this type of session today. In my view, that is really the future of machine learning automation. Rather than AutoML, I think we should be talking about ML ops. AutoML, I have quite a lot of skepticism around, given that AI models can have a lot of unintended consequences. You really have to have quality controls.
Good. Yes, we'll come to your skepticism about AutoML, and yes, I'm sure we will expand our topic on ML ops. But let me bring in ThengHui into the discussion. ThengHui, you don't have much legacy infrastructure, so I'm just wondering, from your point of view, how do you actually make sure that you can democratize analytics and get ready to the point where you can automate it?
Yeah. Thank you, Winston. So yeah, I agree with Lee, because when we start all these data projects, right? So the first thing is that we think of like, we always want to link every data come together, right? So like a company, when they want to start this data and AI journey, they always start with like a center of excellence, hiring all the tip-top data talents. So there's no right or wrong. If your CFO agree, I totally no issue on that. So, so the thing is, from my learning and experience, right, because everything is established in. So I would rather like start with a small data, okay, instead of big data here. Why? Because we are looking at the right data and the right people, right? So we need to tackle in the way, let's say, a strategic data problem first. Okay, this is as a start. We don't need some people like a PhD level kind of data scientist. Probably what we need is like a citizen level, is a normal data scientist. So the key here is how we enable the non-technical user, actually it's the business user, end of the day. So to enable them to understand data first. I think this is very important. So this is the so-called data-driven mindset that we're going to implement in the organization, right? And nowadays, a lot of increasingly good, I think, good data and machine learning tools out there in the market that really can help and make the things easier. And then we even can produce more sophisticated analysis using a lot of market tools nowadays. So no matter from data cleansing, data integration, or even we are prepared to do a predictive analytics, for example, right? So when your data team is very small, or you have a new data team, right, adopting some tools probably will help you to elevate the pressure, I would say. Yeah. But one thing you have to watch out is sometimes there are a lot of overkill features, which is because your team is still new and small, right? Yeah.
Okay. Suganthi, what about from your viewpoint, as you worked with a lot of customers and clients across the region, I'm just wondering, how do successful companies make the shift to democratize analytics and bring in or actually train up citizen data analysts? Because we've been talking about citizen data analysts for a very long time, but they are very far and few between in a few companies.
Yeah, I think, the word digital transformation is oft overused, much as it's a key buzzword. We all have heard this in some shape or form and many times a day in our present lives. I think the lesson from the pandemic, and we are in a post-isolation era, we also have learned that if you're not a digital business, you're more likely to be out of business. So this has mandated a lot of data democratization and democratization of analytics, the mandatory, almost non-negotiable need to make sure that data and data analytics is a pervasive skill set of the workforce, and not just the hyper tech savvy people are used to and given privileges over data and the various tools. So it has mandated the empowerment of the citizen data scientists. What our clients share with us and what we at Alteryx help our clients do is to bring together data, process, people, and an overarching strategy so that they can work on this vision of empowering as many people in the organization. Now, not everyone is tech savvy or needs to be tech savvy. Our analytic needs are varied and different, acknowledged and admittedly, and our technical skill sets are different. But like the previous panel talked about, there is an increasing need to bring domain expertise in very, very close proximity to analytics and data, because just knowing the tools and the methodologies and all the complex statistical models is not going to cut it. So we increasingly see that our clients are recognizing that I've spent millions on a few exclusive few, like the data scientists and that elitist community, but I'm still struggling to see value, because the bulk of the people who actually use this data and analytics to drive insights and breakthroughs are the citizen data scientists or the knowledge workers, who still somehow don't seem to have access and the privileges that are granted to that elitist few. So we see more and more of our clients trying to balance out their spend so that it's not just the data lakes, the complex, centers of excellence or analytics, but we see more and more people trying to spread that spend and balance it out so that the citizen data scientists on one hand get the best of the best tools, but this, the data scientists get best of the best tools, but the citizen data scientists or the want-to-be data scientists, the knowledge workers with the domain expertise are not left out. Interestingly, we also did a survey with IDC where respondents said that more than 94% of the respondents said that it's important for data fluency throughout the organization. But what drives this data fluency? Well, it was simple. The more people I get to onboard this data journey with me, democratizing data analytics, the more mature I get and the more returns I get. So hence this propels the need to actually continue to reflect on, am I spending too much on a select few, or do I need to balance out the spend so that both sides get empowered rather than disempowered with data? So
Thank you.
Been our...
Thank you, Suganthi. Suganthi came out with very interesting points, and I'm going to talk to Lee about it. Before we go down to the hard topics, I'm just looking at it from the soft topic and looking at citizen data scientists. So Lee, from your perspective and from your experience, Suganthi talked about data fluency and making it takes time for data fluency. And also we need people to get data curious before they actually start using the analyst tools, especially citizen data analysts. Do companies have the staying power to actually allow that to happen? Or are they always scared that something's going to go wrong?
Yeah, I think some great points, which I can only agree with, Suganthi, that you've mentioned. The domain knowledge is absolutely critical. And the way that we've approached it is really bringing a cross-functional team together. So obviously within within my immediate team, we have expert level data scientists and in future engineering. That's another topic. We just have mentioned data scientists here, but we need to start talking about ML engineering as well. But beyond that, the domain experts fully agree. And we've actually tried to centralize those in one digital team. And this we have on a regional basis. So we have actuaries, underwriters, people with domain-specific knowledge. And you need to have that on-the-ground daily fusion. Obviously, as a big multinational, of course, like many others, you have to deal with the local and regional office dynamics, right? And what is your operating model? Who does what? So I think one needs to be realistic about citizen data scientists. What we have done is we have a global analytics curriculum training. And this is a multi-tier level. So firstly, there's a basic foundation. Everyone should have basics understood. Then there's a level which is more for client-facing people. They need to be able to converse in analytics, translate business problems into analytical problem statements, uncover opportunity. They need to have a broad understanding of the data. Then comes more what we call black belt level, which are people like actuaries, other technical backgrounds that have the inclination, the ability to transform into analytical data scientists. And then you have really the expert level, which I would call the more center of excellence, like my team. But we do need to be realistic about that journey. The reality is many expert level people have taken perhaps 10 years, to be where they are. And that's not an overnight process, just like it isn't for actuaries. The type of judgment that you get from having 20 years of actuarial experience is very different from 1 or 2 years. You just can't compare it. So to answer your question, firstly, it's training, right? We have the global curriculum around analytics, and that helps. You need to have a consistent effort to drive cultural change and awareness around the importance of data. But then I think it's also, being realistic about what you can expect from people that have gone through training. They have obviously their day jobs. So yes, it's a nice ambition to have everyone in the global company being interested and curious about data. But then there's the operating model and the reality of efficient delivery of value. And that's why I think you need to be clear on your operating model. So, I kind of feel center of excellence teams are at times unfairly, there's a bit of a bad rap that they get in being an elitist. I think the business has to be clear on an operating model. If you have regional and local teams and then just other business functions, who is doing what? It's one thing to talk about descriptive analysis and reporting and Power BI. It's a very different thing to talk about machine learning models that are fit for purpose to go in production and make automated decisions with real consequences. These are very different ends of the spectrum of analytics, from descriptive to prescriptive. Descriptive to prescriptive. So I think we must be realistic and appreciate the culture around responsible AI. It's another term I think for today. In our space, the errors from models have real financial implications for insurers. They may just pay a lot more claims than they plan to, which is very different to other use cases where the cost of error can be smaller. So I think in as much as we want a data citizenry, we must have a risk culture around AI to appreciate consequences to error so that we really have a trajectory that's sustainable and responsible. Otherwise, AI will get a bad rap, unnecessarily.
Lee, just expanding on, trying to expand on what you have just mentioned, especially the last part in terms of responsible AI. How are you actually educating your team around responsible AI, and actually the entire team across Munich Re, because that is huge, is important, but it also takes different people to identify, hey, we may not be in the right part, please take a step back.
No, exactly, Winston. I think there's a twofold approach. We have a global analytics team at our head office in Germany that my team as a regional team works very closely with, and they have the initiative of global training on responsible AI, a small foundational layer that everyone should have to kind of cultivate the right awareness of the importance of this. I think this is previously thought of as a softer topic, but in fact it's a hard topic. Bias and fairness, ethics, transparency. This is not a soft topic. It is actually a must-have. Obviously, apply judgment the extent you apply it in every use case. But globally, we have training. Regionally, my team is part of the Singapore Regulatory Consortium that is building responsible AI principles and validation methods, the Veritas group. And that's really, I guess, how we're actively shaping how this evolves. But within my team, we've built, responsible AI capabilities, dashboards, frameworks specific to our use cases. So this is something that we now apply to all AI models that have material consequences or use for our clients. And I think what makes it different again is to think of consequences. So what is the cost of model error and to who? So it's, there's in our space, it's very much financial. An insurer that uses an AI model to decide how risky you are when you buy coverage, if that model has error, it could have real financial consequences for the insurer and ultimately customers. So responsible AI is not just a soft topic about transparency and ethics. It's very much about risk management and reputation and the onus we have to the public interest. So this is a massive topic. In the last year or two, I sense a shift from soft to a hard topic.
Thanks. And ThengHui, from your perspective, who's in charge of the model risk, and how are you mitigating a lot of this risk as you expand the analytics and even machine learning across? You're on mute. Sorry.
All right, sorry for that. Yeah, so we have a risk and governance team, right? So when the data size grow and the use case grow, so it's time we to look into this so-called data governance framework. Okay, so this is how we manage the risk, because when we deal with a lot of data, right, this data can come from our customer data, even from our operation data, sales transaction data. So we must taking care very carefully on all this, because in Malaysia we have PDPA and the GDPR worldwide, right? Then so I give you an example, when a customer sign up in your platform or product, right? Then how the data flow from the customer client side to our database. And then it's end-to-end journey. Are you encrypting all for example, the password, and how you handle all these we call PII, the personal identifiable information? Then all this must be extremely clear about that. So with the data governance framework, it's a guideline. It's a guideline, and we always refer to this, and what kind of people can have what kind of access or privilege to our data lake or even our data warehouse. Okay, usually a data lake is we have a privilege open to more technical people, because they using a lot of data, because outliers data also is an interest for them. And in order to build a machine learning model, they need more data instead of a structured data is sitting in a data warehouse. So this is how we control the access of every different data users here. Yeah.
You're on mute, Winston.
I am on mute. Sorry about that. What are the chances of that? So, Suganthi, what your thoughts on what ThengHui and Lee has been talking about?
Yeah, I think absolutely valid points. Certain businesses lend themselves to much more less tolerance for any sort of errors. So it's great. You get faster answers because the machine is more intelligent, or we'd like to think of it that way. But the models need to be constantly refined and redefined as often as it need be. So I think the end goal, where we've seen our customers really succeed, is when that end state, there is absolute clarity on the end state. And then you work backwards, because that end state is a destination, but there is a huge journey before you get to that destination. And all the checkpoints along that journey, possible blind spots, possible risks, possible underwhelming experiences throughout that journey need to be understood. And then that journey planned. I mean, we do things using our own solutions or those available in the market to do things like lead scoring, where a little bit of room for error is not going to kill us. Okay, maybe it's a missed opportunity or a delay in opportunity, but it's not going to kill us. Like Lee talked about in assessing risk, the actuary will not tolerate risk. Right? So it's a very different. So the use case needs to be very clear. And we're not just going to use technology and analytics and data because it's all there. But we need to be very, very clear about the end state. And we need to be also equally agile in adjusting the models when the data is not giving us the outcomes, or is actually pointing us to an outcome that is quite contrary to our expectations. Because technology is great, but we've all seen how technology can sometimes not be the answer to every problem.
Winston, maybe just a brief follow-up on that. I think given the title of this session, right, Suganthi has mentioned model retraining, model maintenance, and we could probably lump model monitoring with that. If you do not take care of that technology-wise with ML ops practices and technologies, it isn't an automated process as much as it could be anyway. So that's an example where in our space, if you cannot retrain models in an agile way, I fully agree, Suganthi, and that's the right word. Then what you have is you have model drift, and while that happens, the consequences are there for your stakeholders. And if you cannot intervene early and retrain, the business case comes under threat. So I now believe that MLOps technology is actually part of risk management. It's no longer just process, it's how you implement the process with technology. So if you take basic, whether it's Azure, Google Cloud, whichever platform you're looking at, there are now modern tech stacks available for executing MLOps. And I think this is still fairly new. Companies are still dealing with a lot of manual data extracts, manual model retraining, and all the operational risk that goes with that. And of course, the pushed out lead time to redeploy that model. So I think this is a key topic for automation today. It's really on the production side and the movement of models from development to production, and the whole model retraining, the maintenance process.
I think that's good points, Lee. I think we will expand on that actually on MLOps issues as well as model drift, and later on we can even talk about your thoughts about AutoML, which I would like to see. But I'd like to bring in Suganthi now. She has a presentation, and for the next 8 to 10 minutes, she's going to tell us how automation can power faster, better business outcomes. Over to you, Suganthi.
Sure. Thank you. I'm going to try to share my screen, and I'm hoping everyone can see it.
Yeah, we see it perfectly.
All right. So just let me walk you through, the topic is about end-to-end automation of analytics, and a little bit about Alteryx and how we foresee the end-to-end automation and how we enable our clients around this. As I said, the lesson from the pandemic, if anything, is that if you're not a digital business, you're going to be out of business. And a lot of people have realized that to become a digital business, there are two key tenets. One is to be able to automate as much as possible and as fast as possible. And the other is to democratize data and analytics. So two key themes have emerged. And it's not just about the tech hyper experts that feel empowered, as I said earlier. It really enables anybody to put data to work. And truly, analytics for all environment is what is going to drive this data-driven decision-making and an end-to-end automation, and with data democratization at the center of everything. So in line with that, a quick introduction. Alteryx may not be known to everybody at this session, so I thought I'll make a quick introduction. We are a 25-year-old company headquartered in the US, NYSE listed. We are singularly focused on helping our clients derive insights and breakthroughs from data when they work with data. So singularly focused, we don't do anything else. We are globally present. We operate through partners as well as our own presence. We operate across every industry, and we power more than 8,000 customers across the globe. Our customers range, from virtually, they come from any vertical. And yes, about half of the global 2,000 actually are powered on Alteryx as they go through their digital transformation journeys. Now, with that, I'd just like to introduce us to an interesting survey we did with IDC right here in Asia Pacific just last year. And this survey was rolled out to 500 respondents across 5 countries, across 9 verticals. 94% of LOB leaders, IT leaders, digital transformation leaders agreed that data analytics is important for their organizations to stay performant, data fluent, data confident, data curious. But surprisingly, only 19% of Asia Pacific companies that were surveyed said analytic experts. And why was it important to be an analytic expert? Because it was important that they were able to participate in cost reduction, in business model innovation, in new product development. And they also identified that there were 4 key ingredients to the recipe to being a mature player when it came to data analytics. And they were strategy, data, workforce, and process. Now, interestingly, most companies said that they were okay with the data and the strategy piece, but where this whole thing started to fall off was when it was process related and workforce related. So again, we're talking about empowering citizen data scientists and embedding intelligent decisioning into key processes that would drive their business. And that's where people said they were falling off. Now, this phenomena is not limited to Asia Pacific, it's actually across the globe. So if you think of a similar study by the International Institute of Analytics, most global companies said on a stage of 1 to 5, 5 being nirvana, they were stuck in that 2-ish range. And one of the main problems they were stuck is because the number of people on this journey along with them, the citizen data scientists or the knowledge workers, were not getting onto this journey fast enough. And that was stalling this whole journey of digital transformation to them. So let's take a step forward and let me walk you through how Alteryx accelerates your analytic journey. And it's a very crisp presentation, given we are in a panel, in the midst of a panel. So, and happy to engage outside of this to get into specific discussions, right? So basically, Alteryx automates end-to-end by helping clients like yourselves do a few things: standardize, analyze, model, and then automate the dashboards and the insights that you can potentially get from your data. And we start off with typically the data engineers designing and automating data pipelines to load data into the data warehouses or data lakes, much talked about in the earlier presentation, no matter where that data lives. And then it doesn't stop there. You can even orchestrate these flows to manage the entire pipeline. Interestingly, then, the analysts can then pick up and use that data, and they can use simple no-code, low-code dragging and dropping the data blocks to exactly how they want it. And they can input data and output data very freely, promoting this notion of complete data democratization. So it's not just a technical folk, but it's also people with domain knowledge who can intervene and do what is right so that we don't drift away from the main North Star where we are targeting this entire automation to get us to faster. And then we can jump onto Alteryx machine learning to build optimized models. We talked about the constant need to retrain these models. And with this, we can predict future trends, future behaviors, and so forth. And then we slap on pre-built rich interactive charts and dashboards that can do all the heavy lifting behind the scenes, so that as an empowered knowledge worker, I just focus on the insights and the breakthroughs from these data. And models can be built for you through these technologies that are integrated end-to-end, and these are all fully explainable. And you can even do what-if analysis with key drivers and play around with these drivers to simulate and share results with different stakeholders. And at the end of this, business users can use what we call auto insights, which is basically helping us to automatically uncover insights, run executive summaries, review key performance indicators. Don't stop there. We can get deeper. You can get into something we call overviews, where we can see how the trend has been over the last year, the last quarters. We can even get deeper into what's the causation. Where have I increased? Where have I decreased? What are some unexpected or expected changes, surprises, and shocks? And we can keep drilling down into different segments to see how different things have contributed or not contributed to the KPIs that we were tracking. And importantly, diving deeper into unexpected changes or unexpected events. Now, the beauty is, through automation, Alteryx would scan this data and refresh it with every refresh that we go through. And this enables us to analyze long-term trends as well. And while previously doing things like weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly reports has been a super manual process, with all this end-to-end automation and integration, everything is at the click of a button, so that all the heavy lifting is actually offloaded onto technology. And we can now, further add something that we call missions into this, so that this is truly going to give us the insights into and what we call analytics for all, because everything is accessible to the appropriate knowledge workers, accessible anywhere, accessible anytime, within a strong governance framework. So that was a very quick sort of sharing of what Alteryx does for our clients. And I'll be happy to pass this back to you, Winston.
Thank you, Suganthi. That was an in-depth presentation. I'm just going to ask both Lee and ThengHui, do you have any thoughts on the presentations?
Maybe I'll kick off briefly. I think, if you look at complex data sets like we use insurance, the key thing that comes to mind is domain knowledge and the complexities of dealing with multiple data sets from different source systems. And even those applications that have generated the data require domain knowledge, like rule engines. So I think before we can get to a drag and drop state of any data usage, we really need to take a step back to say, how are you going to manage the raw data extracts from source systems, passing them, pre-processing them, preparing them, reasonability checking them, merging and linking them with other data. So preparing model-ready files, which is what is sitting behind any visualizations, we've just seen, is the byproduct of a lot of intersectional, domain knowledge, data science, and that is really the crux. Preparing data and reporting is straightforward, but if you get the domain knowledge wrong, everything downstream is impacted. So I think that's really just what I'd like to share is this deep domain knowledge required to make proper use of rule engine and back office system data. And the other nuance I want to add is B2B versus B2C. If you are a B2C, probably the data is sitting within your organization. We just heard about data lakes and warehouses in the previous session. But if you are a B2B, you may be reliant on your clients sharing data with you. And then you have an external data ingestion and you have reliance on their system environment. It's not your own systems, where you might have a detailed knowledge of the system, the data dictionary, the structure, etc. So I just want to introduce that I kind of feel this positioning that we will just automate data extraction to model-ready flat files is perhaps underestimating the domain knowledge required.
ThengHui, what about your thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to add on, in the day-to-day operation, how I see the user work is quite a manual way. So people like asking data from every department, every business function. Then they can start doing all this consolidation on the data and doing some showing some patterns, trends from the data, right? And all this is quite taking their time. So I think a platform like giving a user a single point of access, no matter you are technical background or you are a business user, right? It could be a very convenient place. Okay. So including from how we collecting the data, setting up all this ETL process from every data sources, different data sources. We can have a structured data, even semi-structured, or even an image file, video file that we have is quite seamless, flowing into one place. Usually people call this data lake. And if we have something like a graphical user interface, it could be helpful as well for people who are not from a technical background. In this case, right, so the onboarding or the adoption of the data-driven culture could be faster, I would say. It will be somehow catalyzed by using a right tools. Yeah.
Yeah, agree. Suganthi, your points, I know the solutions are not meant to solve any issues, is to bring the culture forward towards a certain direction. So the questions then can be asked, can be a bit more at a mature level. But Suganthi, can you add to what has been talked about by Lee and ThengHui?
Yeah, sure. So I completely agree with Lee that a technology is an enabler. And yes, so, there are technologies, and Alteryx is, one of them that potentially can if you're talking about an end-to-end integrated solution, right from the engineer to creating the models, to visualizing, to creating, to accelerating the actions required to propel a business, there are technologies out there. Alteryx is one such technology. However, it does not dispense with the need for domain knowledge. So, which is why we believe that technology should empower all. And earlier I talked about the, our organization sort of overspending on one side of the fence, the data scientists and all the tech savvy people at the expense of the domain, where the domain resides, the domain mastery and, expertise resides, the knowledge workers. And I think technologies like Alteryx try to bridge that gap and try to help more and more companies actually balance out the current imbalance so that we are not compromising on the domain expertise. If I get the domain expertise people, the knowledge workers and the citizen data scientists to actually work on the models and recommend changes to these models, the drift is less likely because that North Star is my final end goal and I want to get there. And the domain people can help me get there faster. Technology is one acceleration, but the knowledge worker is the other acceleration. So our experience working with insurers, banks, retailers, e-commerce, manufacturers is that we engage as much. So one of the advantages of Alteryx has been we engage with the lines of business. We don't leave them out. We are extremely inclusive of them because we understand that the cumulative experience in their human brains is far in excess of whatever a technology can provide. But the technology can help them accelerate and incorporate that human intelligence into whatever they are trying to deliver as end result. That has been our experience.
Thanks. Lee, just slightly switching topic to diving in slightly deeper into what you mentioned earlier before the presentation. In terms of ML ops, I think one of the issues, especially when it comes to data models or even ML models, is validating the models and validating it quickly, especially when you're looking at meta performance as well as biases. Where are we in that? Because validating models is actually important when you're testing it with, they usually say unseen data, but not many companies actually do that, or they don't even have the time to do that.
Yes, I think, it's fascinating how machine learning has really brought I'll call it statistical learning, has really brought a focus on how do we use data to validate value for what purpose. Many models historically have effectively been built on the same data that they tested on. And I think statistical learning, machine learning has radically changed this philosophically and actually kind of highlighted some of the naivety perhaps that some models were built with before. So I think a lot of progress has been made. Most professional analytics teams today, they know the basics about this, the difference between train, validation, and testing data. And how to really draw testing data samples. So I think the first side is just what you need to do before you go into production with the model. And that is firstly the basic data science performance metrics. But then you need to understand what those performance metrics mean for the relevant business KPIs or metrics. So there will be both some sort of value-based KPI in the business, usually around automation or accuracy, whatever that means for a given business. And then there will be the downside, right? Risk-based metrics. So there's always an optimization after the initial model is developed, where data science metrics are optimized to further optimize to the trade-off of cost and benefit for your users. And then obviously there's responsible AI, which deals with the bias, transparency, and those kind of things. So all of that has to be done ideally before you go into production. And then obviously once you're in production, you need to have monitoring processes to monitor model drift, detect it early and trigger model retraining. And then it becomes an MLOps discussion about how you automate that workflow and how you reduce operational risk in that workflow. So yes, I think the industry's come a long way from the basic validation of models. I think today most competent data science teams would not have a problem of time to validate models. It's a simple process of coding, and a lot of that's really straightforward to code today. It's more about the judgment on which metrics and the trade-off of cost and benefits in optimizing for example, thresholds of models. There's so many other areas where things go wrong before validating. There's no point validating a model that's designed to solve a problem that isn't what you're solving, and that doesn't consider the production environment where you have to deploy that model. So I think there are many other areas where things go wrong. But I just want to come back to the data point. I do think that the devil is really in the detail there. And before you can even contemplate any descriptive analysis or model development, you really need to be sure of your data. And there are basic things like granularity of different data sets that have to be joined. A lot of domain issues relating to the source systems, the business processes behind them. And if you don't really get a grasp of that, everything downstream is impacted. So in as much as, yes, we bring the domain experts, sometimes you can have an actuary or an underwriter, but they're not necessarily a domain expert in the source system and the issues around that system and business process. So I think we need to distinguish different types of domain knowledge. The knowledge work I think Suganthi is describing, in my view, might not always on a day-to-day basis be close enough to where things go wrong in using the data. So that I think is what differentiates AI teams that drive value, is firstly getting the data right in that respect. And I think then beyond that is a good word from Suganthi, the North Star, which is being very clear on what problem you're solving and what matters to which stakeholder.
Agreed. Thanks, Lee. ThengHui, what about yourself? Thoughts?
Yeah, I would like to add is before we deploy any machine learning model, because usually we will have more than one machine learning models in any business use case, right? So besides you setting the KPI, the performance metrics, right, and usually it's accuracy. So that giving how we target the output or the result that we wanted. Okay, then the point is we need to be realistic, because sometimes we see the accuracy is high before go to deployment. It might be only like statistically correct at the point of time, and things happen, new things happen every day, especially how customer behavior. Customer behavior change quite fast, and sometimes we got a lot of a surprise from the customer. Then this thing will definitely like screw up your machine learning model most of the time. So when we design this, the ML ops, the process must be flexible enough, and we always injecting like a human intervention into it, so that whatever the machine learning model couldn't handle, then we will pass to the human level. Yeah. So in short, is between the data driven come out the machine learning model, but the business, the domain expert, which is we need to get a balance point between these two, which is very important, because it actually drives the overall KPI that you set earlier.
Just to briefly add on, I think what you're describing there is edge case management in production. And I mean, yes, you need to have the monitoring process and tool in place, depending on your use case. I mean, we do it in real time with our own dashboards that we've built that monitor business and data science KPIs and model drift. But I think then, beyond that, it's a question of how can I put it? Yes, I think model drift, like I said, you need to really understand the consequences of it. And you need to know how to translate those data science KPIs into kind of risk implications.
Suganthi, you want to add on to this?
I think she's on mute.
Yeah, she's not.
We're all taking turns at this. So I said technology is an enabler, but sometimes it gets in the way. All right. So I think we are all sort of resonating, because we are saying that there's nothing to replace that, all the visceral experiences and all the domain knowledge that, so whenever people say, oh, will machines replace human beings. It's, we all know the answer. It's not. The machine can do a lot of things to make life simpler, because we live in the day and age of the great resignation. Fatigue is setting in, but it can never replace the superior human brain and the cerebral powers that we are vested with, especially as we gain mastery over our areas of work. And that's exactly what we do. So we actually engage with our clients on what we call innovation programs, where we take specific use cases. So it's not like you're not buying technology because you just love the technology and it's, you'll be left out if you don't buy it. No, we actually work on that end game, that end goal, that end state, and then people see, hey, the art of the possible, and the end states get propagated across the organization, because risk tells finance, finance tells HR, HR tells, and then they realize, hey, this technology is a generic one, but it's how good a use I put it to, and we see ourselves pervasively used across an enterprise because it's use case based, and people actually see that they can get to those destinations faster, as I said. So what I kind of walked you through earlier is just the technical capabilities, but we all know that that's a given in this day and age, to overcome the speed issue and the time to value issue. But the actual use cases, the actual model refinement, the actual putting to the test, that proof is in the pudding. How close are we getting to the end game using this technology? And that's when I said, even from personal experiences, we never get it right at the first go. We have to keep improving, right? Maybe we didn't consider all the factors. Maybe there's new data available, but does that technology enable you to then embrace all those changes happening around you, remodel, based on current indications, and then get you to a better place, a happier place? And that's what we constantly test our solutions with.
Suganthi, maybe just to add, I think just 2 quick points. I think the one is about culture, and you raised a great point there, which is about expectations for first prototyping, first deployment of models, what to expect. I think companies are often expecting that the standard is quite high of what to expect, but I think the transformation of the organization to be data and AI ready is a long-term investment. It's really a transformation. It's not an incremental change. And so I think it's important to manage expectations about that agile incremental journey. The second point, just about the edge case management and the replacement of people cognitive. From our side, within the industry, we are actually packaging various types of intelligent automation. So firstly, we have rule engines, which we believe are best placed for certain things. Then we have AI models, which are augmenting the rule engine to bring greater automation and accuracy. The human is still in the loop. So for example, cases that we don't decision by a rule engine will come to an AI model, and where it isn't decision by that, we'll have a human in the loop, doing a final decision. So that is exactly our vision. We are augmenting with AI rather than replacing. And especially when you need to deal with edge cases. So knockout criteria, for example, this is something, again, we develop with domain knowledge. We then have our own monitoring tools. Our models are integrated with our technology at all the insurers. You may know that our rule engine is the widest used in Asia, globally, in fact. So I think just coming to the culture, yes, I think the expectations there is very interesting, because often, clients may be frustrated with the time it takes to reach the targeted KPI level. But the downstream dependencies on data quality, data extraction when you're dealing with legacy systems. So I think expectation management is key, and there I think technology can play a big part in kind of streamlining those basic processes of extraction, quality assurance and data, and then obviously in production, how you're going to ingest production data and store it and process. So just the culture and the augmentation points I wanted to add.
Thank you, Lee. And we have like around 1 minute. I'll pass it to ThengHui to sort of give his observation, because I think one thing he highlighted earlier was you can't take the human out of the whole. There's no such thing as full automation. You still need human intervention to a certain extent, and Lee was talking to that. ThengHui, could you expand slightly on the point, and then we can close up the discussion?
Yeah, sure. So because we have a lot of data, all this data quality is a main concern every time when we build a machine learning model. And this machine learning model is very specific to one problem statement. Okay, most of the time it's like that. So when we are crunching all the data, right? So we must always remember one thing is after the deployment, we always need someone to handle. Let's say if this machine learning have outliers input that we might getting a result which is very offset to what we expected. So one example is like when we do a lot of video analytics, right? And some even characters or letters that couldn't be recognized. It could be a foreigner languages, which is suddenly out of our context of this problem statement. So all this moment is where we need the human to kick in and giving like a manual support to the system. So in short, it's like we are not replacing totally like the manpower effort here, but in somehow we cut down the manpower effort, which is like so that they can more focus on high value added activities. This is very important to a business ROI here.
Thank you, ThengHui. And that's all we have in terms of times. There are questions on the Q&A, which we'll try to answer. But I also will invite everyone in the audience to reach out to the speakers who have done a brilliant job. So from ourselves in CDOTrends, I would like to thank all our panelists and our sponsor Alteryx for such an insightful discussion. I know we have just touched the tip of the iceberg, and we probably could continue discussing for the next 2 hours.